Okay, great. So I guess we can start. Uh, Welcome to our also special session for businesses. I hope everyone hears me well. So we have a very interesting topic today. I think it sounds like a hard topic, but our sessions are dedicated to put top experts in a friendly environment, and everyone who goes and joins us our sessions just to think about these topics, talk about recent trends, and get new knowledge from that. So this topic is not a random one because we live in a very turmoil right now. Brands are facing trade wars, epidemias, policy changes. So, and information attacks go from TikTok to Telegram to Facebook to any kind of social media where they can see these attacks coming. And usually they are not well prepared because some of these attacks are not just coordinated, but they are very new. So we decided to make this session about this, about how brands can actually navigate information storm. So without further prolonging, I would say that Osawul is an AI-powered solution for brands, businesses that helps to make narrative monitoring, also to uh, analyze sentiment, key opinions, and information threats for businesses, governments, NGOs. We are very flexible in terms of finding those threats and helping businesses worldwide. So today's agenda will be mostly about customer backlash because it's a huge issue right now, as you see, and how to handle it properly. Also, current information challenges for the global companies, what is new, what is old, and how it influences global brands, and also tools to navigate information storms. And of course, maybe our distinguished speakers will actually share their experience on cases that they have faced through their career or maybe recently also. So let's go to me. So today it's not Dmitro Bilash, who is our constant host. It would be me, Andrew Bevs, Chief Marketing Officer for Osawul. So if you would like to be our speaker, contact me and you can join our community and of course talk about topics that are sensitive, very interesting for you and valuable for you and for our audience. I am myself a reputation management and marketing geek. So I've been doing marketing and reputation management for a while, but I think it has changed, and my experience is just a small fraction of the experience of our speakers, and I'm so happy that they are with us today. So let's go to Jared first. Jared Meade has 2 decades of in public relations, and recently Jared has received a very great award for Outstanding Freelancer of the Year in Davos. So Jared, please, the stage is yours. Tell us more about your award and more about your experience.
Sure. As you said, I have over 2 decades in public relations, specializing in reputation management and crisis communication. I'm one of those people, kind of like you, Andrew. I find this so very interesting. My coworkers, as well as my family, always tells me that I'm the calmest when I'm in the midst of everything else going kind of crazy and chaos. I find some kind of Zen calmness and all of that, and really find it fascinating. Just kind of reputation management, how to weather those storms. So that's something I've always been fascinated in, and kind of where I focus most of my business. But I'm really happy to be here, and thank you guys for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Jared. Beatrice Bourdel, please tell more about your experience. 25 years in pharma, consumer health, FMCG energy is great. And I also think what is great about Beatrice is that her 30-year-old son has his own marketing company, which I think is a great path to success when you know what you would like to do at the age of 13. Because I'm now 30 and I'm not certain if I'm doing the right thing. Just kidding. But Beatrice, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Andrew. Good day, everyone, depending on where you are located. I'm personally based in Europe, more specifically in Switzerland, and it is really wonderful to be part of today's conversation with Jared on a very important topic, that's for sure, and extremely relevant. So indeed, I'm Beatrice Bourdel-Grant, a global marketing and communication leader with more than 20, well, as you say, 25 years of experience. It's scary to say this figure, but it is the truth. So let's be transparent about it, because that's the topic of today as well. So 25 years of experience across industries such as pharma, consumer health, energy and FMCG, and design. I've led brand and reputation strategy for big corporations such as Bayer, Nestlé, Galderma, Technip, and Alstom. And I think, in today's world, this topic is extremely important to discuss today. So very happy to be here. And about my son, yeah, now he's 15, but I know it's kind of weird. Some people have told me not to put this information because they say, it's not credible. I mean, whether it's credible or not, it is a fact that he's very creative. I won't go into details because that's not the topic of today, but just now he's really surprising us. He's on holidays and he's creating something. I mean, this is unbelievable. And, he started to reach out to clients. And of course, at first I say to him not to charge anything because they don't know it's a child. But he was coming up with really amazing things. And as you know, for also our attendees, the youngsters are extremely talented when it comes to those new technologies and tools. They are really fast at learning. And I'm not ashamed to say that I'm learning from him, but of course he needs me as well because I have a lot of experience. So we are quite, complementary in that respect, and that's nice. Yes.
I think it's great. I think it's great. The earlier you start, the sooner you know where to go and achieve more results there. And I think that it's great that such young people can do marketing, experience more. And I guess with AI, it just will grow bigger, faster. And of course, they learn more and more in better ways that we used to. So before we start with the questions, I would like to encourage everyone to put your questions in the chat or in Q&A box. If we are out of time, we have also like this opportunity for you to connect with speakers and speak with them directly, ask them questions directly so they can actually advise you on your issues or questions and share their experience. So with this one, we will start from customer backlash, because this year, I guess, started with massive customer backlashes for different corporations worldwide. Nobody expected that. And one of the most hot topics discussed right now is TikTok and this manufacturing narrative that was launched by TikTok manufacturers, who were like claiming they are doing some stuff for luxury brands, mentioning a lot of brands which are not even related to China sometimes, but still the tricky thing about that they ended up with the end customer believing them. And it's a new tactic, I guess. And I would like to know your point on that, Jared. What do you think about that? How companies can cope with that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting kind of topic and event that's happening. I think it's one of those things where you have some people that are believing what's being said. You have other people that realize that these manufacturers in China they're most likely not manufacturing the goods that they're saying they are. They're knockoffs, which have been around for a long time. This counterfeit market is something that these industries have had to deal with since the beginning of these industries. So it's nothing new for them, but I think it's one of those things that you have enough people on social media, they're kind of believing it or looking into, even if it's not. Take, for example, I think one of the manufacturers was Hermes. Most people are going to understand that Hermes is not produced in China. They kind of understand what the product is and the cost of it. So it may not hurt them as much or specifically, but I think what's happening is because they're talking about how some of these luxury goods are produced, are manufactured in factories in other countries, people are looking into it more. So they're looking into where goods are coming from, how they're made, if they're worth what they're being charged. And so I think that's where the issue is coming into play. So I think companies have to be really transparent about how their products are manufactured, which countries they're coming from, what type of quality they are, because if they're not, these people who are starting to dig into it because of these TikTok videos are going to start to see where these inconsistencies are, if there are any, and that's when they're going to start really getting backlash.
Yeah, it's actually a nice point. Beatrice, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm pleased that Jared mentioned about Hermes example because one of my family member works for Hermes, and I can confirm that the bags are produced. Well, he works in France, in fact. I think there might be other factories elsewhere, obviously, but it's really handmade, and in this case, my cousin is doing it with his own hands in France. No, to come back to the topic, it's a serious one. It shows the power of social media and how a news, real or fake, can travel so fast. And I would say with social media, it's not like it's all bad, far from it. There are lots of good examples that it is extremely positive. However, you have to be also very careful. And I remember an example also with a previous company. Well, I guess I can name Nestle in this case, and there is nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, there was an issue that happened in a country quite far, in fact, from Switzerland, on another continent. And before knew it, it was spread all across the globe. And this specific event became a major crisis, starting from really almost nothing, I would say, So it's not exactly the same as what we are seeing here. Because my example, by the way, is from, I guess, 6 years old or 7, and you can see that since then, the trends on social media has only increased dramatically in terms of speed, in terms of reach, and I would say the challenge that we face today in our profession, Jared and I, is definitely to figure out what is true and what is not true. And that's the problem that Jared mentioned, is exactly that about these videos, because there might be some pieces that are correct, and usually it is the case, and then they kind of amplify, they exaggerate, and they add facts and data that are completely false. But of course, as a consumer, you see that on those media, and you are like, you are not sure, right? Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. And before you know it, it damages greatly the brand. And especially when we are talking about names like, you mentioned Jared Hermes, but Louis Vuitton, not to put it on the spotlight. I would not be so sure in this case. Again, I don't want to go into this debate, but from what I read, it's not crystal clear here as well. And that's bad because, it does create the wrong perception. And I'm sure that the product is still very good, by the way. It's not about that. But once the reputation is damaged, once there is a doubt, it's really difficult to I would say gain the trust again, from the consumers.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me jumping in, I agree with you, Patrice.
Yeah.
And I think part of that issue is with social media, because it's not a platform that's regulated really in any way, is that you're not fighting against, how would I put this? So, if something was printed in a newspaper or was put on broadcast news, if it was incorrect, you have an avenue to kind of combat that, to ask for a retraction, to ask for a correction. With social media, most of us know 80, if I'm being generous, 80% maybe of what's on social media we know is probably not the full truth. Sometimes it's not the truth at all. We kind of have that understanding, but there's no way for us to combat it, to make sure those things don't get put out there. And once they get put out there, as Beatrice said, perception becomes a person's reality. That becomes their truth. So even though, a company can come back and say, here, we can show you where our goods are manufactured. If those videos have been out there long enough and people have been sharing that, oh, these companies aren't telling you the truth, you get some people who will still keep that perception. And no matter how much you combat that, they're still going to have in the back of their mind, oh, they're not telling me the full truth. And I think that's where the reputation hit comes into effect, is that you're trying to combat something that we really have no control over. We have no way of forcing someone to believe that what they're seeing on social media is not true, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's interesting for me how would look the proper response of the company, because some of the companies just keep silent, they don't even talk about this, or they just don't really notice it. Is it the right strategy though? Because maybe those people who were targeted, they were not the like end customers in the end. So basically, because the goods that were offered, they are much cheaper than original ones. So what would be the blueprint for those companies in this case?
Well, I mean, I think what they're doing, as we were talking about this topic, I was digging into it a little more and researching it. And I think a lot of these companies are doing what they should be doing, which is, talking with the media, sharing with them their side of things. They're being transparent about their production, about where these factories are. They're also making sure that they get that message out to the public. For instance, within the US or the EU, there are certain labeling restrictions that if it's labeled, made in France or made in the USA, there has to be a substantial portion of that product that is created within that country. And so when they're labeled that way, um, you can't just label that something is made in France just because you want to, or made in the US. So when you see those labels, there's an understanding that they've met those regulations. And so by talking with the media and sharing that information and making sure that other people understand that, the story's starting to get out there. I think where we hit the roadblock again, as I was saying earlier, is that you're still going to have a certain portion of the public who trust social media more than they're going to trust our traditional ways of communicating with the public. So I think this goes back to, and Beatrice, I'd love to hear your viewpoint as well, but goes back to what I often tell clients, and that is that before a crisis happens or an issue happens, you have to make sure that you have banked enough goodwill with your public that when a crisis happens and you're starting to withdraw some of that, it doesn't cause your reputation to essentially go bankrupt. And so I think, say for companies like Hermes, I really think that this will be eventually kind of a blip on their radar. I don't know that it's going to harm their reputation in a great way. And the reason why I say that is people who can afford or save up to afford, say, a Birkin bag, I think they understand that they're buying a name, they're buying a luxury, they understand that they're paying more than what it might actually cost to produce. But it's not the product that they're after. It's the reputation of the brand. It's how it makes them feel. It's the luxury of owning something that was made by Hermes. So I think people who are searching out for those products understand that. So I don't think this type of thing is going to change their mind. They kind of understand that, spending the same amount of money on a bag as you might on a car or a house, we all understand that's luxury. That's, it's a little crazy, but if it's what you enjoy and what you want, you should be able to do that. So I don't think anyone is shocked to say we're paying way too much for some of this stuff. I think we all know that. So again, I don't think that will hurt their reputation in that way. Um, and I think it's because those brands have kind of built up this reputation, this goodwill with their audiences, that the people that matter, the people that are going to buy those products from some of these organizations, they know what they're doing. They know what these organizations are about. They know what it is they're purchasing. Um, I think what it may do is it's for those people For those people who maybe always aspired to be able to afford some of these luxury goods but can't, it may kind of taint their view of what it is. And then that will be shared. So I think in that way it might harm their reputation, but I don't know that I would go as far as to say like we're going to see a huge drop in sales for Hermes or Louis Vuitton or something like that, because I think people already understand that is what luxury is. We're spending a lot of money just to be able to say that we own something.
Totally agree with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry, Andrew. I agree with you, Jared. Absolutely. I think what you mentioned about also building this trust and having, um, long before the crisis to have a plan in place to make sure that there is a plan A, B, and C, and even to whatever letter, because those crises, they will happen somehow. We can't predict everything, but we can anticipate that those type of crises will happen. And I fully agree with you, Jared. People, they buy also an experience. It's about how they feel about the brand, and it will not prevent them from buying it from the, let's say, regular stores. I fully agree with that statement, absolutely. um, and I think it's important to be non-judgmental as well, and that's what you mentioned as well, Jared, or alluded to. This is not about, I saw one of the videos, and this person is saying, oh, this is completely crazy to pay such a price when you can get it, I don't know what was the example because the prices are indeed crazy, but let's say 20,000 bag and you can get it for 2,000, or something like that. Well, it doesn't work like that. And whilst most of us, I mean, I can certainly not afford to buy such a bag, but it doesn't mean that I would go and buy, this counterfeit or fake bag at a fraction of the price because I want to have one. No, because I would know that it's not the real one. And what would be the point almost? So I fully agree that I do not anticipate that these companies will be really impacted by that. Mid-term, short-term, it's more about, once again, the reputation damage for just a few days or, a short while. Because it's never nice to have your name out there and then to kind of for consumers to have maybe a doubt,
Yeah.
based on what they see through these videos. So yeah, as you advise your clients, Jared, same with me. I always make sure that they are well prepared with whatever is going to come up. And one thing is certain is that there is going to be a crisis at some point in some of the, elements or criteria or you name it. This is guaranteed, regardless of where we live, of how we live, of the type of product or services you deliver. You can be sure that there's going to be a crisis of some sort. So if you have built this relationship and this trust and you have anticipated things as much as you can, then there shouldn't be a problem. And okay, it's a bit shaky maybe for a few days, and then life goes on, I would say.
And Andrew,
Actually,
again,
yeah.
sorry, if you don't mind me jumping in, a thought that came to me as Beatrice was talking is I think what we might see, this is a might, with these videos coming out again, these larger or companies, I think will weather this in the long term. I think what we might see though is now that the conversation has been started about where things are manufactured, how they're manufactured, I think other organizations should make sure that, for lack of a better term, all their ducks are in a row as far as manufacturing. Because I think we're going to see people who are going to start thinking more about okay, if I buy this product, where did it come from? Where is it being produced? And so if they start looking into other companies that maybe aren't as large as a Louis Vuitton or Hermes, and they do find something that maybe isn't quite what they thought or is being manufactured in a way that maybe is unethical or whatever the case may be, I think you'll find smaller organizations that could find themselves in a much larger crisis. And I think it's all stemming from, years ago, people didn't really think about where their products came. They just went to the store and bought them. But as these conversations happen, people are thinking about this more. And I think you'll have a group of people that will start kind of diving in and looking where are my products actually coming from and who's creating them.
I totally agree with you, and I think that it also brings us to the point, that we have discussed earlier with you. I guess like you can also share maybe your insights from the Davos forum. So basically, that monitoring and firefighting is no longer effective. So if you are in a communications sphere and in PR, and as Beatrice said, well prepared, but does it also bring communication and PR specialists to the point where they also should be monitoring something on a constant basis for their clients, for potential clients? What do you think about that?
Yes, I think you definitely should always be monitoring your reputation, monitoring what's being said. Whether that's your customer base or if it's even people who aren't your customers or maybe don't like your brand. People always talk about sometimes they'll see something on social media and they're like, well, we're just going to ignore that. Those are trolls. And there is some truth to that. Some people are just on social media just to see what trouble they can cause. But I always believe that you should even listen to those voices just because you never know what someone's going to pick up on and you need to be prepared for what might kind of catch fire. So even listen to the people that are just out there, talking bad about your brand because you want to be prepared. One of the things that at Davos that was talked about was that we're kind of, and Patrice alluded to this, but we've kind of moved away from uh, advising our clients that at some point you will run into a large crisis and we need to be prepared for it. And we've moved into you're going to run into a crisis, but it's probably going to be like this small crisis, one after another. It seems like every day there's something new. Those big crises still happen, but I think we're in an age where it's like every day there's something else that we've got to talk about, something else that's hitting your reputation. And I think we have to be careful not to look at these small issues and just think, well, it's not that big a deal. Because over time, those small issues will start to chip away at your reputation. And before you know it, you've lost all that goodwill that you've been banking that we were talking about. But as you were saying, we've kind of hit this era of, I think what the speaker called it was perma crisis. And basically, we're just in a constant state of disruption, whether that's, political instability, social volatility, environmental collapses, technology kind of accelerating at a rate that we can't keep up with. There's always something that we have to be monitoring and talking about because it's all leading back to a reputation of organization. So I always tell clients you have to constantly be monitoring your reputation. Have someone that is their focus, whether that's social media listening, whatever that might be. But you need to know what people are saying because you never know what will catch fire and what people will pick up on and will become a much larger issue.
Totally agree with you, Beatrice. I have uh, the same question, but maybe from another angle, taking into account your great experience in like pharma and oil. So these are spheres with high sustainability risks, and sometimes it feels like a lot of companies right now trying to put those as a priority too, or maybe sometimes they try not to like uh, to roll up some policies. And it seems to me like it may play in the long run a very bad sometimes game with the brand. What do you think about that? If you don't monitor what you have been monitoring for the last 20 years, can it also cause you some harm in the long run?
So is it specifically on the sustainability topic you were interested, or more in
Yeah.
general?
We can talk about sustainability here also, and
Yeah.
also on issues that have been monitored but are not monitored anymore. because of market
Yes.
trends or something like that?
So this is really, it's a bit like the AI topic, right? AI and
Yeah.
sustainability are really those huge transversal topics that bring a lot of discussions and debates, and it's good. I think it's very healthy to discuss sustainability. I mean, of course, especially if you look at the oil and gas and energy sector at large, but the oil and gas certainly, it can be a tricky one. And I remember being really like hit quite hard because I was working in this industry, and I believe that, I'm talking about when I started, it was, well, exactly 25 years ago, yeah, in 2000. So back then, it was not such an important topic. It might be shocking to say it like that, but it's we have to be transparent in this webinar, and it is fair to say that it was not. It was not too much of a topic, um, still considered, of course, because you can't ignore that you really pollute quite a lot in some cases, and you do damage to some regions and very beautiful places as well. So it would be wrong to say that it was not considered at all. It's just that it was not monitored, to your point, Andrew, like it is today. And I have to say, and it's not because I come from this industry, they have made huge progress. You might say it's not enough. They still, pollute and this and that. Well, I will reply to that. The thing is, we all need, electricity to function. The cars, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, they don't all run on electricity anyway. So you still need the petrol and the gas to have them run. So it's a huge debate, and in all industries I've worked for, whether I mentioned FMCG or pharma or energy, it has always been a topic that is very important and that we have been addressing more and more. But those crises, to come back to this information storm, to go back to the topic here, I have faced a lot in on this topic of sustainability for sure, and this is not over, far from it. And there is not one answer to that question. It's a tricky one, and I know because I'm still in touch with my ex-colleagues from there. They are really working hard on it. However, there is not one solution for that topic. But of course, Andrew, they do monitor. You have these ESG reports nowadays that are mandatory anyway. So they have to monitor as a minimum. And I would say they do not only monitor, they do something about it. Because once you have the KPIs in place, you can act upon those KPIs. And that's what is very powerful, because it's not good enough to just state the obvious in a way. And in fact, to have a report that will gather all the data, it's good because it was not done previously, for sure. But then what it allows you to do for these companies is to really have the strategies and tactics in place to counteract whatever needs to be done.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that it's also, bring us forward to the question that it can be a sustainability problem, it can be some kind of other policy problem, it can be just, some problem of a backlash. So just in general, how do you feel these information threats have changed for big companies over the time? Do you see any trends in this or new actually threats that specialists in-house and outsourced specialists actually face? because we know that some brands have their own teams that monitor everything, and they mostly reply to bad reviews. But bad reviews is not a narrative which is launched against your company and dwells there, and it's not a comment on Yelp or somewhere else. It's a real thing that can actually, like a snowball, go into your company and actually affect your brand. So yeah, Jared, have you seen new trends recently? What can you say what companies are facing right now? What hurts them most?
Yeah, I think, right now companies are facing things that I don't think we ever thought that they would face as far as, deep fakes, AI generated, manipulated photos or, leaked communications. We're seeing a lot of that here in the US in politics, a lot of leaked communications, which is causing, for better, for worse, various crises. You have, brand spoofing where social media profiles or websites are pretending to represent a brand. So you always have some of these things have been around for a while, some are new. I think in the grand scheme of what it is, Beatrice and I kind of counsel our clients talking about reputation management, crisis communication. The ways of fighting those, I think, are somewhat still the same. Just meaning, again, going back to making sure that you have built relationship with your customers and ensuring that you've banked up this goodwill, that you've built a good reputation, making sure that you let ethics and your values lead all the decisions in your organization. If you're transparent, you're respectful, and you're honest from the get-go, once a crisis or issues happen, I think you've got a lot of that goodwill built up and you're able to kind of use that to help insulate your reputation. I think again, it's cultivating and maintaining not only with your audiences, but also relationships with the media or influencers in your industry before you need them. Don't wait till a crisis happens, but be doing this constantly, so that when a crisis again happens, you've already built this foundation to help you weather the storm. I think also one of the things that I don't know is necessarily new, but I think as the world becomes smaller, is more relevant, is that you have to watch not only your industry, but other industries, because you never know when a crisis that's happening more broadly, whether that's cultural shifts or controversies, when that might kind of feed its way into the industry that you're in. For instance, going back to our first topic with TikTok and kind of the manufacturing of luxury goods, that may trickle down to other smaller organizations where they have to worry about that, be thinking about that. I was just talking to a colleague the other day when we were talking about kind of the tariff wars that are going on currently in the world. And, a lot of companies, say here in the US, that are US companies that are, their products are made in the US, at first may think this isn't something we have to worry about. But when you really dig down into the details, it may be a US made product, but there may be one piece of that product that is manufactured somewhere else. And then all of a sudden now these tariffs and what's happening do affect your company. And so again, I think we've gotten to a place where you really have to watch and be monitoring not only your industry, your reputation, but really what's happening in the world, because you never know when that might feed into your own organization and become a crisis.
Totally agree with you. Beatrice?
Yeah, I think Jared mentioned the two big letters here. It's really AI is so amazing, so powerful. We mentioned in the introduction that the young generation is really leveraging it big times, and that's great. I think I'm personally using it a lot as well, obviously. The danger then is, how do you differentiate between what is real and what is not? And I guess, my answer to that is that you just have to assume that everything you get, every pieces of news, videos, pictures, is maybe fake in a way. I'm a bit extreme, right? But I had this discussion several times with communication and marketing peers. And yeah, I think it's you have to assume that it might not be the truth. And is it a bad thing? on one hand, you can say yes, because then you can't, rely on any data. You can't believe what you see, what you hear. But I see it as a good thing. I think it's good to have, the ability to question where does it come from. And I would highlight here the fact that, there is no single source of truth, anymore, because you are fed with information through so many media. So the social media is one, but of course you have a more traditional PR. And that should help you to make an informed decision as well, and to make sure that you analyze, those elements in the best way. And I think it makes you think. You are not passive anymore. You have to be active, and that is a good thing for me. Yeah, I would say it's a very good thing.
And I think, sorry, Andrew, if you don't mind me jumping in, I think Beatrice made a good point that I think we are kind of in this age where consumers are automatically assuming everything could be manipulated in one way or another. And so that, as Beatrice said, that could be a good thing because I think it compels people to find out for themselves. I think on the other side of that, that's why organizations have to understand that whether it's before a crisis, during a crisis, you can't just, put out a press release, make a statement where that might have worked, 50 years ago, but you have to constantly be kind of pulling the curtain back and allowing your consumers to see what kind of industry you are, what kind of organization you are, what your processes are, because it's going to take a while, and you kind of sending the same message over and over again before they finally maybe start to really believe, okay, they've shown me enough that I can believe that this is true, because most people are very skeptical nowadays, and they're not just going to read, a newspaper article or a profile on your CEO and assume, oh, everything in here is true. Everyone's always going to look at it and say, well, it might be true, but it might not. And so it's this new state where we have to really make sure that your messaging is breaking through and that you've really built these relationships. I think understanding, I told someone this the other day that, there was a time when you'd ask someone in PR, what is the most important skill that someone needs to learn to be in the industry? And almost everyone would say writing. You have to be a good writer. You have to be a good writer. And that never set well with me. And I think as time goes on, we're starting to understand that really, from my point of view, the most important thing in PR, crisis communication, reputation management, is an understanding of human behavior, because that relationship piece is becoming more and more important. And if you understand your customer, what drives them, what is important to them, you're able to communicate better. So just being able to communicate, great. But if you don't understand who it is you're communicating to, your communication is going to fall flat. So I think just we're understanding that it's not just about what we're communicating to the public, but it's about really getting to know and understand them and be able to share with them what it is that they want to hear. I'll give you an example without going too deep, but when we were at Davos, one of the speakers was an MP from over in the UK, and he was just mentioning the Labour Party, who just was elected into office, and he was saying what kind of turned the election around for them. As he said, they started to understand that for years and years and years, they were telling their constituents what they thought they needed to hear. They weren't taking the time to understand what it was they were focused on, what it was they wanted to know about. They were just constantly communicating to them what they thought they needed. And this last election cycle, he said they really started to listen to their constituents, what it is they wanted to talk about, what drove them, what was important to them. And he said it shifted kind of the election in their direction. And I think we can take a lot of advice from that, or best practices, to understand that when we're communicating, whether it's in a crisis or not, to our audiences, we need to stop thinking about what we think we need to tell them or what we think they want to hear, and really get to understand who they are as a group, as individuals, and what it is that drives them and what it is they want to hear from us.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think it also brings to social listening and to questioning, like going and asking people about their opinion, which is like long forgotten, because I guess not so many companies doing focus groups anymore, or they're doing it just for targeted products or something like that. And we have questions for the audience, basically. There are so many of them from Alina Simpetru, and I will just point out one interesting, like they are all interesting, one very interesting in terms of what we have said. So what is, in your experience, are the top priorities in building a great editorial strategy for brands? I would rephrase it, maybe just if Alina is not against it, what is, in your experience, the top priorities for building great communication strategy when a brand asks you for that?
And I feel like
What
I've
we
been
should start
talking a lot.
with.
So Beatrice, if you don't mind, I'll let you go first. I feel like I've been talking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely, Jared. I don't mind at all. Either way, I'm completely fine. So I would say first, it starts with the audience. This is really something that has to be clearly said, because, doesn't matter how good your content is, but if you don't have the audience in mind, you can't tailor the content based on your audience. You have to have a good analysis, a good understanding of a target, and that's really by building, your audience first. So sometimes with a brand, you are talking about the persona as well. So that could be relevant for the communication part as well, by the way, because then you have a good understanding of who you need to target. And then I would say the second element, so that's linked to the first, is about the tone of voice. So to make sure that you have a consistent tone of voice across all channels, because when we talk about the audience, then comes the messaging, and of course then the channels. Where do you want your information to be visible? So the tone of voice, you need to spend quite a bit of time to really understand what you want to say, so the narrative, the messaging, but equally important, how you want to say it. And as you know, when you build a brand and you build a reputation, you have this emotional connection that comes into play. And this is absolutely critical, because if you want to connect with your audience, you have to somehow convey the right emotion. To come back to the example of luxury, of course, this is very important, very critical in this case. But not only, if you look at the consumer health space, I'm not going to the pharma space because this is a bit more complex and highly regulated. We could, if we had more time. But on the consumer health front, if you let me take a brand that everybody knows, so aspirin. It happens to be a Bayer brand. So aspirin is a brand that is sold over label, over the counter, right? It's an OTC brand. And it's a very old brand. That's the thing as well. So you would think, oh, surely we know everything about, this product, all its benefits, etc. Well, I would reply to that, yes and no. And by building, exactly what I mentioned about the audience, the choice of channels, and the tone of voice in terms of the narrative and the messaging, you can still highlight in a different way, and a very relevant one, the product benefits and how you are going to, I would say, get the most out of this iconic brand. And even if it's a very old one that has been on the market for so long, there are still things that are discovered, and that's a scientific element to it as well. But really, I would say, Alina, to your point, it's really those three main things about audiences, about the tone of voice, messaging, narratives, channels choice, and maybe one element to wrap up all of this is about the purpose that you can define also with those three elements to keep in mind a focus on the purpose.
Great, great. Jared, what is your top list?
Yeah, I think Patrice kind of went through those, and I don't have much to add. I think that what a lot of brands maybe sometimes forget is there's a lot of research that needs to be done. Everyone wants to jump in and start, putting things out on social media, putting things out here and there on different channels without doing the research to understand first what kind of organization do we want to be? What is that, as Patrice said, that tone of voice? What is our kind of reputation that we want to build, but also who is our audience? Who is it we're talking to? Who's going to buy our product? Where do they get their information from? I talk to a lot of clients, and I kind of ask this question sometimes when I'm helping with different PR strategies. I do it a little bit for fun because I always know what their answer is going to be. But I ask them, I say, if we could get information about your company anywhere, you know, sky's the limit. What would it be? And they're always going to name here in the US, of course, New York Times, the Washington Post, all these big name publications. And I always say to them, but have you stopped to ask, does your audience read the New York Times? And most of them don't. And it's like, okay, you could get this great piece in the New York Times, but if your audience isn't reading the New York Times, what has it done for your business? So again, I think the most important thing when building out these strategies is that research portion. Really understand who you are as an organization, who your audience is, and then as Patrice said, what are the channels they're using so that you're not wasting your time putting out communication, especially if you're in the midst of a crisis. I mean, you don't want to put out communication on social media if your audience skews older and they're not using social media because I mean, you may still do it just for those few who are, but you also have to understand that, okay, our main audience isn't using TikTok. So we also have to find other platforms and other ways to communicate to them. So again, I think a lot of times organizations forget that research piece and really understanding what it is they're trying to build.
Totally agree with you. Like research and correct tools and channels. Sometimes uh, even old-fashioned channels like leaflets or something like that nobody believes are effective. They might be effective because there are some kind of leaflets that can actually discredit your company. So you can get a leaflet that actually helps your company. So as we are almost out of time and we are close to the end, I would like each of you to share your biggest piece of advice for your peers, what they should do, either they in-house or in outsource, what they should do when the information storm attacks their company, and what should maybe tools they use. So Beatrice, the stage is yours.
Yes, my advice is quite simple, probably not so easy to implement, but it's about staying true to who you are, what your brand stands for, and be consistent in your story across every touch point, every channel. I would add to that, but that's a very personal element, is to do all of this with empathy. I think if you have this empathy element, you understand better who you are talking to. You can tailor better your messaging, and you can have a lot of success this way. So yes, that would be my piece of advice.
Great, great. Jared?
Yeah, completely agree. And again, just going back to really understand who your audience is, not just, it's this age range, it's more male, female. I'm talking deeply understand who they are, what drives them, what motivates them. And then, take the time to, whether it's every quarter or whatever it might be, to really sit down with your team or with leadership and really try to think through if we were going to have an issue, if we were going to have a crisis, where would that originate? And because I think as PR people, as communicators, it's our job to always be thinking, 6 steps ahead. What could be coming around the corner? Being able to look at what's happening around the world, look what's happening in the news, and to be able to predict what might be happening. Because a lot of times these things come in cycles, and after you've been in the industry, your career's gone on, you can kind of start seeing these trends of what's happening and what's probably going to come up. I'm not sure as far as your audience, how many who are listening today reside in the US like I do, but one of the piece of advice I give to my colleagues here in the US is I find, and I'm going to make a little bit of a generalization here, that a lot of us in the US tend to forget there is a great big world outside of the US and there's things happening. And the things that are happening outside the US do affect us. So I always tell my colleagues, make sure that in your profession, you're not just focused on what's happening in your industry here in the US, but you're really looking international and you're listening to, reading the news of what's happening around the world. Because I think it makes you better prepared to be able to see what those issues or crises that are coming up might be.
Great. I think, yeah, as the world goes global and it's still global, we have to look around the corner and also look at the AI and all this new stuff, which is sometimes quite frightening, sometimes quite exciting. And I think that we had an amazing session today. I thank you, Jared and Beatrice, for being with us today. For those who haven't joined us or have joined us later on, right now even, the session will be recorded and distributed to everyone who registered and also to our community. If you want to join us and to speak to Jared and Beatrice directly, just drop me a message and see you. Have a great weekend. Thank you again and bye.
Thank you, Andrew.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.